do
Okay. Both flying blind here.
We're flying blind. All right. That's really the motto of this show. We're back. Nate, Chandler, Tailgate Report. Sorry about that. Took a week off, but we're back, and we have plenty to talk about on this week's show. A couple of games that we'll catch up on, Grandville and Jenison this week. We talked to Coach Stiegel again, our Coach's Corner segment, so good to get back to him. We're back in the seated chair position here again as well, which is nice. We can sit back a little bit more and get into a lot that we have to get into in today's show. So first off, our recap, a pair of losses for the Grandville Bulldogs, one on our air, one that was on Michigan Sports Radio most of the time. I know I actually talked to Brock today with the Rockford crew on some of their issues. If you were trying to tune in, obviously, I could apologize on behalf of Michigan Sports Radio, but it was a Wi-Fi issue. It sounds like at Rockford School, apparently all week they've been having issues there, and whatever distinct line that he has set up that's been perfect all year went down. So I know he was able to get it back at the end of the game. So we apologize on behalf of Michigan Sports Radio for that, but we'll be back this week with our normal broadcast at Jenison for Grandville this week. So Rockford 37, Grandville 14 in that game. And, of course, Caledonia 50 and Grandville 40 in the week before. We're going to start there, Chandler, because that's, of course, where we were. Got a chance to call that absolutely wild game. And as we mentioned, it was I think we said on the broadcast, it was a one-touchdown, 10-point game because of the 2-point conversions in there, but both teams scored 6+ touchdowns. Let's just general thoughts on that game. Mostly, I think you came out of it with, we both maybe weren't the biggest Caledonia believers compared to what a lot of the hype was, and I know they've moved to number 2, number 1, even in some statewide polls. We were made believers much more in that game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Caledonia's for real. Yeah, that was the biggest takeaway of the night for me. I think the Bulldogs played them pretty tough. I mean, they hung in there. As I said, kept it a one-touchdown game, 10-point game, and battled back quite a few times. It was just one of those games where they were right on the verge of making it a real comeback and being right there, just couldn't get that stop. I mean, all game long, you're chasing a stop defensively, trying to slow down that Caledonia attack to get themselves back fully in it, and just couldn't do it. But they kept chasing it and were able to keep it pretty close in a manageable game.
They got the one stop in the first half that came at the very end of the half, deep in their own territory. They made it a one-score game going in the second half, but the difference was Mason McKenzie, and I know he got a little banged up in that game. Looks like he should still be okay going forward. I don't fully know how much he might have played last time out for Caledonia, but Chandler, I mean, 7 touchdowns, was it 4 on the ground, 3 through the air, and a ton of just 60, 70-plus yard runs. I mean, this guy, we called him a Mr. Football sleeper going into the week. I mean, okay, I know we'll call it political reasons, there are probably some guys at other quarterback positions that are bigger names, that are whatever, that are going to win Mr. Football this year. One probably plays at Martin Luther King. He's going to Oregon. You may know who he is. There's another that's going to Notre Dame. Those are the guys that are probably going to wind up winning the award because they're the big names. I mean, if I had a vote in the same way I would have voted for Zach Ahern last year, I would have voted for Mason McKenzie this year right now. I don't think there's any football player in the state. He's got like 22 total touchdowns. There's not a single football player in the state that's making a bigger difference and can make as big of a difference as this guy makes. We saw it when he got injured and how the offense really slowed down.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. In terms of stars and rating, and in terms of recruiting, yeah, maybe not the highest ranked guy in the state of Michigan, but when you're talking about the impact he has on the field against really quality teams in one of the best conferences in the state, I mean, you see it. 7 touchdowns against a good defense. The Bulldogs' defense has been good throughout most of the season, and he lit them up. I mean, he was doing everything. He was chunking big runs left and right, threw the ball enough to be effective and keep the defense honest, and you could just see the offense when they let him take over, how dangerous they truly can be. Of course, they've got other playmakers out there that makes it even more difficult to stop, but when you've got a quarterback like that with that much talent, it makes it very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I think they have officially moved him up to 3-star status now, 24/7. I don't fully understand the process. I'm going to be the first one to admit. I mean, I think 24/7 had someone at the Grandville Caledonia game, and then afterwards he's suddenly a 3-star. So I don't fully know. He deserves it. I can tell you that much based on what I know. He deserves at least that sort of star rating. So that's great to see, and he's going to be a really terrific player. Keep an eye, I think, on, for us, for Caledonia as well, when you maybe look at playoff different options based on what their schedule, Grandville's schedule, how far the Bulldogs go. Of course, last year we picked up Unity Christian. Maybe Caledonia is one of those teams that comes open. You never know. I mean, they're certainly a fun team to be able to watch, and hopefully we'll see them again. And right now they've got a game looming week 9 with Rockford that's going to probably be the game of the year in the state of Michigan. I don't think there's any other way really to lay that one out. Rolls right into Rockford, 37-14. The game where Grandville was just out of it, always a little bit more. They every once in a while got it within 2 scores, even had it with a chance to get within 1 score. Stopped. I think that 3 times they were stopped getting into the red zone in the course of that game. Carson Smith had a touchdown. Reed Graverson had a touchdown for the Bulldogs, but Rockford scores on their first 5 offensive possessions, and it was due to extreme efficiency and extreme explosiveness. This is the stat of the game from that one for Grandville in terms of if you want to look at maybe some struggles defensively. First half of play, Grandville had 45 plays on offense. Rockford had 12, but they led the game by 2 scores going into the halftime break, and I think that is really where you can begin on this game, where even though Grandville offensively did a lot of what they wanted to, and they controlled the clock, Rockford didn't need to control the clock because they were just chunking at 30 yards at a time.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult to slow the opposing team down when they're getting big plays like that. But yeah, I think, just looking at the last 2 weeks as a whole, from an offensive perspective, yeah, you put up a lot of points against Caledonia, who had been a tremendous defense coming in. So you have to feel pretty good about that one. And then last week, as you said, we're able to move the ball. I mean, Rockford always is going to be one of the best prepared teams to try to stop the Bulldogs offense, and held them to 14 points. They gave up some yards, as we said, but able to stop them in the red zone. So, I mean, you talk about a team like that. They're still moving the football offensively, but yeah, the point number's not there against Rockford. But as a defense, starting to see a little bit of weakness these last couple weeks, and part of that's to be expected. I mean, you're facing the 2 best teams you're going to play this season for sure in the regular season, and 2 of the best offenses in the area. A little bit different in how they're going to attack you and how they beat you, but you see just how great of attacks both of those were. And so the Bulldogs' defense, for the most part, against Caledonia, struggled to get a stop, struggled to stop the running game. And then against Rockford, gave up a lot of big plays as well, some on some deep throws down the field, some just on some long runs and some shorter passes that end up going some distance as well.
And the tone was set right away with kind of how that game was going to go, because I believe Grandville's first drive was 19 plays. They just ground it into enemy territory, failed to score. Rockford, their longest drive of the entire game period was 9 plays. So it was explosive. I think offensive coordinator Jason Vanderlaan had to be very, very happy with the way that Mac Vandenhout and company were able to air it out in that game for the Rams. And also Ryan Ahern ran the ball really well, had a touchdown early. So, that's kind of the main takeaway from that game. At the end of the day, it's just coming down to Caledonia Rockford, and I think that really is something we can touch on when you look at the entire year in terms of how this playoff race is actually going to shake out. Playoff race, which we'll talk about later on, because now things are starting to really set form along with the OK Red. I mean, it's that game, and I really do not know who has the edge right now between the 2 of them.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, all season long, we've kind of been talking about our rankings, and Grandville's been right there with both Rockford and Caledonia. And so now that those 3 the Grandville has played their head-to-head matchups against those 2 teams, yeah, you've now seen Rockford and Caledonia separate themselves at the top. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all lining up. Both teams look like they're going to be undefeated going into that one. A huge matchup. And, yeah, I mean, both teams in Caledonia, when we got to see them in person, looked really good. I mean, the offense was fantastic. The defense has been really strong. And then Rockford seems to be doing typical Rockford things, what they've been the last couple of years, with some tremendous playmakers after what they lost last year, too. So, I mean, it's really tough to try to pick that game. And as we preview that one, looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on some Grandville things. Coach Stiegel in the Coach's Corner segment up next will do the best job, especially because we weren't here the last 2 weeks, or the last week at least. He'll do the best job of kind of touching on some of those different things. But one of the points I saw interesting was the Grandville offense, and that we saw Reed Graverson get his first rushing touchdown as a kind of a power back spell option to Sadinsky. You think about hopefully if Junie Figueroa is able to come back at some point this season. Still don't fully know his health status moving forward, or play for the first time, not come back. We've not yet seen him as up on varsity. It gives him one more option, and again, it's all about options without Tyson Mann, because Mann was all of the options in one, and you want to have those kind of different guys. Graverson gives a little bit more of a power back. I mean, Sadinski's a big kid too, but just to give a little bit of a spell back, have a secondary option. I like them being able to mix that in, and that's what the offense is going to have to do. They have to keep spreading it out, minus one guy that we'll talk about that has really carried it the last couple weeks. But besides that, I think it's going to be continuously crucial that they just kind of find all those different options.
Yeah, I mean, you're just really going to have to see some more of that depth continue to step up. I mean, when you lose a guy like Tyson Mann, who was the guy that was touching the ball the most in the backfield for this Bulldogs offense, you kind of see everybody shift up. You see Terry and Sadinski, see their touches start to go up, and then you start to get who's going to be the next depth guy that you can come in, and you need multiple guys in that backfield. So when one guy who's been your primary guy goes down, you need that depth. And unfortunately, when you're faced against teams like Rockford and Caledonia, that's going to be difficult. It's a really tough ask when you're asking those guys to come in and go against a really tough matchup like that. But you're starting to see those next couple guys step up to these next few weeks where there's a few more manageable games for the Bulldogs, try to get them worked into the offense a little bit, and then, of course, hope for some of those guys, and Tyson Mann, hopefully to both get back.
Yeah, and I mean, you said his name in there. I mean, the bright spot despite all the struggle for the Bulldogs. And again, a guy like Sadinski having to come and play both sides as a sophomore. But in terms of underclassmen, I mean, the bright spot out there, especially the Caledonia game, he got all the big yards. Coach Stiegel will talk about it. But Jaden Terry, I mean, I know he's visiting Central Michigan this weekend now. The one thing I can say is Brock Conkle, like I mentioned, called me today. I talked to him. To kind of go over that game and whatever, and some of the things he saw from the Rockford perspective watching. And I think his words, some of the first things out of his mouth, kind of after we talked about the general game, was that running back, talking about Terry, is absolutely for real, isn't he? And I said, yeah. I mean, this kid as a freshman again, and he was asked to get all the tough yards again the last couple of weeks. He sparked the offense against Caledonia. I mean, he is everything we could have thought he'd be. I think you actually said to me today, in half a year, the hype around this kid is eclipsing almost any Grandville player we've seen in recent years. And I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid as a freshman, but I mean, it is really amazing what he is doing right now for this Grandville offensive and defensive attack as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's been one of the guys that's really stepped up for this team, and it's been cool to see. We kind of knew the hype coming into the season of what Jaden Terry could be and what his potential was, and now 6 weeks into the season, to see how far he's came in his development already. I mean, from going week one to already seeing the field quite a bit, touching the football, getting a touchdown here and there, to whether that's been due unfortunately to injuries, but also just his effectiveness in touching the football and running. You've seen his role grow to the point where he's now the guy with Tyson Mann out. He's the guy they're giving the football to against Rockford and Caledonia when you're looking for some tough, hard-earned yards and trying to get those big plays as well. He's been the guy, and they continued to lean on him, and he stepped up. And I mean, it's really crazy to think that he's still a freshman, only 6 weeks into his varsity career, and to already see the trajectory of where he's headed. I mean, of course, you don't want to, as you said, don't want to put too much pressure on him. He's got a lot of teammates around him, but you're starting to see that star potential.
Yeah, also very smart young man. The other week he was posting a clip of one of our broadcast clips or whatever of his 7-yard touchdown against Caledonia. After a bit of back and forth with he snoozed to you and I, he ended it with something like Nate Dreyer goat emoji or something. So that's something you and everyone else can learn from, I think, a little bit as well. Very smart young man, for certain. We'll actually touch on the next point I had. Was going to be talking about it's a little bit of playoff setup stuff. So we're actually going to get into that in a later segment when we go over the playoff stuff, because things were really bad and now got a little bit better based on how they're sitting for Grandville, because things were looking very bad after the Caledonia week. Now it's back to more of what you can probably expect to see. All right, with that, we'll take a break. We'll go to Coach Stiegel, and then we'll come back and we'll break down Grandville Jenison, our game this week, 6:30 p.m. on MichiganSportsRadio.com/MGN, and also our Twitter, our Facebook, our everywhere. So we're gonna step aside. We'll be right back.
The sinister cries haunted Mary through the night. Dawn neared, and still the voice tormented her. She ran towards the safety of her car, flung open the door, and a coyote had somehow gotten locked inside. But the damaged interior was covered, thanks to Farmers Insurance. Coyote Carpool, August 1st, 2015. Talk to a farmer's agent. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Contact the Scott Bates Agency today, 616-531-3441. A proud supporter of MichiganGameNight.com.
I'm Randy Hansen, president of Centennial Securities Company. Recently, I read this statement. When it comes to developing intimacy remotely, sometimes it's better to be heard and not seen. That got me thinking, and I discovered that since this pandemic began, voice-only calls have increased by 78%, and the length of these calls has also increased. Today, Zoom is touted as the savior of business, academia, and keeping families connected. But there is some evidence that video apps make us feel awkward and unfulfilled. There's even an app available that rates your background when you're on Zoom. Then there's the phone, which is basically a handheld texting machine, a social networking black hole. But mouth-to-ear communication is on the rise, and it is most welcome. Like I said earlier, sometimes it's better to be heard and not seen. At Centennial Securities, we love hearing from you, even if we can't always see you. If you're a Centennial client, you know what I mean. If not, isn't it about time?
Centennial Securities Company, member SIPC and FINRA.
And welcome back to MGN and the Coach's Corner segment. This week, been a couple weeks, but very thrilled to be rejoined by Grandville Bulldogs head coach Eric Stiegel. First off, Coach, thanks again for joining us, and how are you today?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. And first, before we kind of get to the actual on-field stuff and whatever, just want to say we've had a chance to talk to your captains the last 4 weeks, and I think this is something I echo every year. I mean, just another really incredible, well-spoken, and really intelligent, great crop of kids this year.
Oh, yeah. And those guys are really a great representation of the football program in Grandville High School. We got a lot of guys like that, too. I mean, not just the captains that are going to be thoughtful people. Do things right. They're good students. They're good and they're great people in the classroom here, and really great kids in the community. So really, really proud that that those guys represent both the football program and the school community in such a good way.
And while we're kind of on that, I know we're coming off in the last couple of weeks here, Victory Day as well.
Yes.
That was the other week. Tell us a little bit about that experience. I know it's always one of the highlights of the season for you and the team.
Yeah. I think it's the 7th time now we've done that. On my time here, we didn't do it one of the years. My first year, and then one of the COVID years, we didn't do it. It's a great event that I kind of brought over here from the east side of the state, and that really a lot of people here have helped get into. We had a lot of our cognitively impaired, autistic, and other severe special education students, come out and essentially get a little mock football game, football camp with our players, the cheerleaders. We have a crowd and everything, an announcer, and it's a day that everybody always loves and always goes great. So really, really good for those guys. And and the message that I wanted to send to my kids is that just by doing simple things, by giving your time to people and giving them attention, you can make a big difference by doing ordinary things every day, and being a good person and being someone who is willing to just give an hour of your time to somebody who needs it, and that can go a really long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's terrific. I always love seeing that stuff every year when it comes around. And all right, let's get kind of some of the on-field. Well, first off, congratulations. You've made it through probably the hardest 2-week stretch any team in the state may have. Just kind of briefly wrap up Caledonia, then Rockford this week, kind of some of the lessons and the chance to reset moving forward from these difficult games and what, like I said, can be learned going ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely saw 2 of the best teams in West Michigan, if not the state. I mean, I think, the polls kind of in Division I show those guys up, both of them in the top 5 or near the top 5. So two really, really good football teams. I think what it showed us is that, there's a level of championship football that we have not played yet, or at least, maybe I shouldn't say haven't played, but haven't been able to play that at a highly consistent rate. We had some lapses in that Caledonia game, both on offense and defense early, that kind of put us behind the 8 ball. And obviously we climbed back in and had it as a possession game, but just couldn't get stops in the second half to get off the field and get the offense the ball back when they were rolling. And then earlier on in that game, the offense had some miscues that probably led to some stalled out drives. And it was a game where, we were going to have to go score for score with them. I think when you go to Rockford, another really good team, probably played us the toughest defensively this year that we had seen on anybody. Very physical. We were able to grind the ball fairly well, but, we lacked some explosive plays in the run game that we had against other people. And then also, we also got the ball down into the red zone. We got the ball down into the red zone probably 3 times and didn't score. where against teams like that, when you get the ball in that kind of territory, you got to punch it in. You got to get points on the board. You got to keep pressure on them. So, two really good teams. Hopefully we take some good things out of this. I think we will. It's one of those where, I do recognize that when we played two great teams, but I'd be lying to you if I wasn't a little bit disappointed that we didn't play the championship football, even though, again, we got some guys out here and there, but so we're going to be looking this next couple of weeks to really try to get on track and hopefully get better as a football team.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned kind of some guys out here and there, and that's one of my next points I want to make. Of course, during the season, the injury to Tyson Mann has kind of been the one that most notably in terms of popping up during the course of the season we've seen. And because of that, though, we're seeing a lot of underclassmen on this team that are having to step in a big role. You talk about Jaden Terry. You talk about Reed Graverson, Easton Sadinsky. Tell me about the development of those freshmen and sophomores as, 14, 15-year-old kids throughout their first varsity season, especially with their role kind of growing with some of those injuries.
Yeah, those guys have really been thrust into it. Tyson was a guy that, was really our lone returning skill kid last year that was on the field a lot. And, obviously he played really, really well those first. Really played about 2.5 games. I had 9 touchdowns in 2.5 games. So, you lose him, you lose a lot of production, you lose some leadership. But I think you're right. Jaden Terry has definitely stepped up for us as a freshman. Has been a dynamic runner, but also I was really proud of him in the Rockford game. Was a very good short yardage runner for us, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1. He got the tough yards for us there. Easton Sadinsky is now a guy who's starting both ways. Started the season, he was on the varsity. He was a little bit nicked up, and now is starting both ways. Hey, welcome to varsity football. Here's Caledonia and Rockford, 2 top 5 teams. You're a sophomore, and let's start at safety and running back. So definitely a challenge. Reed's been our middle linebacker. So that is that's definitely for those guys. It's been a growing experience for those guys. And the hope is, again, you get towards the middle of the season, you get to play some of these really good teams. You hope that those guys who earlier in the year you're looking at them like, yeah, they're young guys. You hope now that they can transition and really be like, I'm a varsity football player. We have to see that growth continue for us to be a championship football team.
Yeah, for sure. Let's look at just on the whole the defensive side of the ball. So, of course, really solid performances throughout the first part. Stopped the run well, in particular, against a lot of teams. Struggles against these great offenses the last few weeks. Tell me about the defense, how kind of charged up they are to return to that high level of play and get rolling down the stretch again.
Well, I think you're right. We did see 2 really, really good offenses. Caledonia with, Mason McKenzie, Townsend, a lot to handle, some good receivers, and I think really good line play too. That was a big challenge, especially for our young guys. I think seeing that, and I think we were probably a little step slow in some spots. Some of that is definitely them, and probably a lot of that is them because they scored a lot of points in everybody. But I do think it showed us again that that different level of. I got to read something and I got to go. There's not like I got to check 6 things and do that. I got to go because the level that we saw the past 2 weeks was, we're seeing guys that are super high level athletes that are very physical and offenses that they have quarterbacks that can run both on the design runs and scrambles, and the quarterbacks can throw really well, and there's weapons out there for them. So it's been something the past 2 weeks where we've had to defend the entire field, and truthfully, that's what you expect in the OK ride. Again, the game's coming forward. I know maybe the teams don't have the records that the last 2 have, but we expect to be challenged there. But I also expect that we're going to see growth there, and we're going to start playing better on that side of the ball because, as you said, we played a pretty good game defensively against West Ottawa, and then I think even when you look at moments in that Byron Center game, it's 28-7 with about a minute to go in the half, and then. They score late and then they get some stuff. So we have played again. It's Grand Blanc played a really good, I think second, third quarter of defense where we were really good. So we have moments where we've played, I think, high level defense, and then we've had moments where we're not. And obviously, if you're not playing high level defense and you're seeing some of the teams that we see, that what's going to happen is what you saw. We're going to give up a lot of points and not get enough stops.
All right, exactly. Grandville head coach Eric Stiegel with us, and Coach. Lastly, this week it's Jenison, so kind of a local rivalry. Coach Zeitman brings some unique systems on both sides of the ball. Preview a little bit of this matchup for us.
Yeah, you're right. It is a neighborhood rival, and it's one that I think both teams want to win really badly. It's a game that both of us need really badly too. In terms of playoff position and those kind of things. And Coach Zeitman does a really good job offensively with what he does. It's going to be it's going to be triple option based. out of the gun or the pistol. But there'll be a lot of other flavors to it too. So I think it just points to us having to play really assignment-based football, but also play really fast and get to the ball with, not just one guy, but 2-3 guys getting the ball and making tackles. And I think defensively they have some big guys, and I think they are probably built to be a team that wants to play physical football and stop the run. So for us, that'll be a challenge that we obviously have to establish that. But, also too, we know that we have a quarterback that has been able to run and throw the ball really well, Carson Smith. So, also probably have to better utilize the whole field a little bit against those guys. And because I think they are pretty good defense up front. And I think that it'll be definitely a big challenge for us, especially being a rivalry game.
All right, absolutely. Cannot wait for it, Grandville. Jenison this week. Grandville head coach Eric Stiegel with us here today. Thanks again, Coach, for joining us, and good luck Friday.
All right, thanks a lot, and go Dogs.
All right, go Dogs. We'll be right back here on MGN. All right, thank you so much.
Daniel the deer danced everywhere. He pranced through fields and jigged through rivers. Then he saw it. What a stage! A place no deer had dared dance before. The hood of a brand new car.
Hey, my car!
And the car was covered, thanks to Farmers Insurance. Deer Dance Floor, December 1st, 2014. Talk to a farmer's agent. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Contact the Scott Bates Agency today, 616-531-3441. A proud supporter of MichiganGameNight.com.
All right, thanks, as always, to Coach Stiegel. Tailgate Report rolls on, and, let's break it down. Grandville, Jenison. By the way, we have a bit of a distraction right now live. Chandler, as many of you may know, is a huge New York Yankees fan for some unknown reason. And it's Monday night while we're doing this, so we're currently watching the first at-bat of the day for Aaron Judge. So if he flips out completely out of turn, you probably know what's going on. All right, so Grandville, Jenison. So, Chandler, it's a local rivalry. Jenison brings a unique attack, but they are coming off a 38-0 loss against Hudsonville last week. So there's a lot going into this game. Two teams that are really hungry. They've had some interesting games in the past. We've got some of the Jenison attack that we'll talk about, but just kind of give us that 1,000-foot view. It's always a really interesting game.
Yeah, it is. I mean, two teams very familiar with each other, as a lot of these teams are in the OK Red, but Jenison, a team that I think not to the same level of Hudsonville, but is really struggling with the strength of schedule when you talk the OK Red. I mean, I think overall a pretty good team when you're considering the area and what they would be like in a typical conference. But I think a team that has struggled in the OK Red when you're talking about teams like Grandville and Rockford and Caledonia. And so I think the record 2-4, not going to be super flashy, but a team that still has some pretty good potential, has played some tough games here and there, and it can't be overlooked.
Yeah, and very well coached. I mean, especially from the top down. Rob Zeitman, a guy that was one of Tony Anis's lead assistants. You can tell that in the offense that they run. Spent some time as a Division I, like a MAC level line coach as well. Like I said, they run the ski gun pistol option. They've got some unique looks on defense as well, but they forced you to run, cover, and space. It's all unique. I think Coach Steele kind of talked about it, but give us an overview that the pistol option, the ski gun, some of the things we can expect to see. It really is just as simple as kind of the veer option, but from the pistol. Yeah,
and I think we're both on the same page that it's one of our favorite offenses.
For sure.
For me, if I were running a high school offense, I think this is probably where I would start. I love the spread system like that out of the pistol, and the different variations you can run with that. I think we've seen some tremendous different offenses throughout the last couple years, and whether that's in the spread or whether it's in the power like the T. But I think just for my own personal, if I were creating offenses, it would something what it would look like. But no, I mean it allows you to do both running and throwing the football. Gives you a little bit more versatility than maybe the spread sometimes, where you can have some power sets. You can still run the football. You can run the option and pitching the football to get to the outside, but he also allows you to run multiple receivers if you're in a situation where you need to throw the football.
Yeah, and they're going to do a little bit more on the power side, I think. They're going to do a lot of 2 receiver sets with a tight end and with a wingback. They like to utilize that. Judge just got out, didn't he?
He did. He grounded out.
Oh, no. So good. Now we're set for another 40 minutes. But they like to do that a little bit. You kind of get into it, and it's obviously, whenever you're talking about an option run offense, it's going to start with the quarterback. That's Braden Arbaugh, who's their junior quarterback. Good shifty mover, delivers a pretty good ball on the run, which is very big. He does those things that you need to. He's good at that first step and reading the pitch. He's good at delivering a pass in motion if he needs to. And that really is where things have to start with this kind of offense, because the quarterback has to be able to be mobile himself and also throw the ball while being mobile.
Yeah, you need a quarterback that really understands the offense. Has to be a smart football player. That sounds, cliche when you're talking about a quarterback, but it's not just decisions in the passing game when you're talking about reading defenses and being able to throw the football in the right spot. When you've got an offense like this, it's also reads in the running game. When you're talking about pitching, there's a lot of decisions having to be made from the quarterback, whether that's keying in on a defender and the read option, whether that's when to pitch the ball, and getting lots of motion back and forth for your offense as well. So lots of decisions from the quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. There is definitely a lot the quarterback has to be able to do in this offensive attack. Now, one of the interesting things Jenison brings to the table is at the running back position, you're going to have a real mix of guys, and that's kind of where the starting point comes in for them. There's not necessarily even one guy that I'd be willing to call the leader in the backfield. You're talking three different prime guys. You have Justin Hoagland, kind of more the speed back to some extent, shifty back. Riley Russo, a powerful, straight-ahead runner, and then the junior Sam Morales, who I would call kind of a gasher, somewhat similar, gets those yards and good burst through the line. And they all do different things, but at the end of the day, they all have a good first burst. That's important because the offense is going to come off the veer so often in terms of the triple option veer. And a running back that can take that give, it's technically a fullback out of the veer, but the back that can take that give, get up the middle of the quick hole that's going to be open there off the read, that's where it's very important. All these guys, they do it in different ways, but that's where they're going to start. They aren't necessarily runners that are, gap scheme running outside. They're not counter running. It's more straight ahead. The quick hole going to open up through the zone read, and you have to make the one cut and hit that hole.
Yeah, and I think that creates a really interesting matchup when you're talking about this Bulldogs defense that through the first couple weeks of the year was dominant against the run game, and now, of course, against some really good teams that like to run the football and can do so and move around a little bit. They've struggled. So I think this creates an interesting matchup when you're talking about a Bulldogs team that wants to get back into form and trying to shut down the run game against guys like that have some good burst. And then when you've got a Jenison team that's going to need to establish the run in order to be successful.
Yeah, and we look at this team in terms of a two-way guy that's big, that's tough, Gage Chatfield. He's a two-way senior, like I mentioned, 6'4", 245 pounds or so. Really strong blocking tight end. He'll get out in the pass game some, but he's the guy that'll be in on every play. So when they're in their base two-receiver set, he will typically be on the line with another tight end as the wingback or the H-back or whatever you may call it, fullback. They're kind of offset. When they're out of a three-receiver set, he then becomes the wingback. So he's still going to be on the field for pretty much every snap. Very smart, very good blocker. We talked about that with Derek Pennington Jr. a couple weeks ago. Caledonia does some similar things. They're not straight triple option veer. They're more read option, zone read type stuff versus the triple option. But he's good there. Also, defensive tackle, defensive end, plays a big role there. Big kid to help shut it down. So it's a pretty big team. It's going to start with Chatfield, though, in terms of the blocking on offense and busting things on defense.
Yeah, in order to be successful in an offense like this, you need a guy like that can provide some power out there, has some versatility. You can line him up and move him around the field a little bit, but the guy that you can use and trust as a blocker, but you can also use him as a decoy and smart enough to know on the football field where to be in order to get open, and the coaching staff able to utilize him as a weapon as well. So a guy that can do multiple different things within the offense and presents a difficult matchup for the defense.
Let's talk about how Grandville needs to attack this team. So again, Grandville 4-2 need a bounce back. Jenison 2-4. Jenison's looking at their playoff chances and looking at who's ahead on their schedule and saying, man, this might be the week that we have to take a Grandville team that might be a little bit down after a couple losses and upset them if we're going to be able to make that march. So their defense might be, I think, the place where they best, because their offense is really struggling. We talk about all those things they do well, but they just still haven't quite gotten it going. They, of course, have lost some big playmakers from the last couple years. I mean, losing Caleb Dean, a good slot man in this offense is such a huge loss, of course. And they have a couple solid guys as well that can fill in, that they've kind of mixed around a little bit in the attack. But the main thing that comes to a front, and Coach Stiegel talked about it, they're big on defense, big up front. Talk about Chatfield. Talked about Riley Russo is a pretty good-sized kid that's going to be playing out at safety as well, that can help stop the run, a little bit bigger for his size. Trevor Martin's at middle linebacker, names that you've probably heard before, big on the front line as well. But the main thing, Chandler, is the way they align. So against more spread teams, they've been going more of a three-man front this year, which we haven't seen out of them. But against power teams, like they did this against East Kentwood, and we saw it last year, they go 5 down linemen front. That's what they ran this year. We've seen them do it, and it makes them very comfortable against Grandville. If you're comfortable going with a 5-2 front and then you essentially make it a 5-3 versus Grandville, in essence, is what they'll do, that puts you in a really good, comfortable position.
Yeah, I think definitely when you're comparing to other teams in the area, when you've been prepared and already running a system like that defensively where you're in that base look that you're going to need to have against the Bulldogs, definitely that's going to give you a little bit more experience. You've already been out there and running it. You've kind of got those guys knowing where they need to be lined up and how to utilize their position in this defense. That definitely helps them. Of course, now going to be lined up in that for pretty much the entirety of the whole game, and not much variation from it. We'll see what they're able to do.
Yeah, I'm fighting with the computer tonight, folks. It's been a struggle. So yeah, that's where it sets up. And again, it's the local rivalry aspect, the kind of neighborhood rivalry that Coach Stiegel talked about. I mean, remember it's right down the road from Hudsonville. It's right there if you go to Hudsonville Middle School to go to Jenison. So it's right in the same thing, and there's a lot of unique things that are to be on deck for this game. It's one of those games that I think Grandville has to be careful not to look ahead, because even though Jenison's 2-4, they have some okay wins early in the year. I'm just saying, with what they can do offensively, with how their defense sets up, it's one of those games where, yeah, Grandville's the better football team, but football a lot of times is determined based on matchups, not always who's the better team.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those games that, at least early, I think Jenison's got some matchups to line up interestingly in this one.
Yeah, it could create some interesting matchups there. I think when you're just looking at it from backed away a little bit, you can see that Jenison, I mean, they need this game. Like you said, if they're going to make a run to the playoffs, they need this one. And the Bulldogs got to find a way to want it, because the playoffs. Looking like more of a sure thing for Grandville at this point, but you're coming off 2 difficult losses. It's not an opportunity or not a time to relax here and think you're just going to coast into the postseason. There's still plenty to play for, and I'm sure that's what Coach Stiegel is telling the guys right now, that even though this is a team that has a losing record, they've got some players and some matchups that they can take advantage of and still need to come in prepared and understanding how important this game is and to get a win.
Yeah, we'll get into it next segment too, but in terms of talking about the playoffs, realistically, you kind of look at Grandville's setup. Like, they went out, they're probably comfortably going to be a 2 seed. In Rockford's division, Caledonia gets moved to, or district, Caledonia gets moved to the other one in the area. If they lose even a game, and the way things go, you become increasingly at risk, even if Caledonia doesn't get in your district, of moving on to a 3 or maybe even a 4 seed. Probably not a 4 seed. I'm trying to play this up right now that they have to win. I think if they win one game, they're like, it would just come down to East Kentwood. And actually, you know what? We're going to get into it next segment, because there's a couple big brain ideas I have, including there's a chance we get to week 9 and look at each other and say Grandville throwing this game against East Kentwood is actually the best thing that could possibly happen. So that's also something that might be potentially on the horizon, the way the playoff points are. It's going to be a weird year, the way they're going to shake out for sure. So we'll get into that. We'll get into some rankings right after this.
I'm Randy Hansen, president of Centennial Securities. I've heard it said that professional coaches measure success in rings, college coaches measure success in championships, and high school coaches measure it in titles. But youth coaches measure success in smiles. At Centennial Securities, we're like the youth coach. Our success is measured by the smiles on the faces of our satisfied clients. If you're a Centennial Securities customer, you know what I mean. If you're not, isn't it about time?
Member SIPC and FINRA.
The sinister cries haunted Mary through the night. Dawn neared, and still the voice tormented her. She ran towards the safety of her car, flung open the door, and a coyote had somehow gotten locked inside. But the damaged interior was covered, thanks to Farmers Insurance. Coyote Carpool, August 1st, 2015. Talk to a farmer's agent. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Contact the Scott Bates Agency today, 616-531-3441. A proud supporter of MichiganGameNight.com.
All right, we're back. Nate and Chandler, Tailgate Report. All right, it is time to look at some playoffs, look at some rankings. Finally, I would argue we're not too early for the playoffs. So, again, we go to snoozetoyou.com, as we always do. Look, I blew it way up. You might be able to see a helmet at least now, because you couldn't see anything last week, and nothing that was going on worked. So here is Division 1, District 1. This is where the Grandville fans right now are most interested. And currently things are sitting at Rockford versus West Ottawa, Grandville versus East Kentwood. And really, so long West Ottawa and East Kentwood get to 5 wins, which is not a sure thing, by the way, especially with the way things are going to wind up playing out right here. This is the way things would safely be. You move into the next district, and right now Caledonia has themselves a cakewalk. They have themselves playing Howell, and then they got Grand Ledge and Holt, who they already beat up on Holt earlier in the year. So, when I talked about Grandville potentially throwing a game and it helping them, based on what happens the rest of the year, West Ottawa, East Kentwood, it may get to a point that last week of the year where if not enough teams, right now we've got 4 teams making this district, where if we get to the end of the year and it looks like East Kentwood maybe isn't going to have enough points, which I actually think West Ottawa is going to be the bigger risk, which Grandville's already beaten, of course, you might have a situation which it's very important. Hudsonville's the X factor because they can essentially replace West Ottawa. So, again, they're going to continue to win. Well, they're going to lose this week to Rockford, and then they'll be maybe, and then they'll be able to continue to win. If they beat Rockford, then just throw out everything I'm saying right now because I actually don't know how the math works out then. But roughly, I think you might get to that last week of the year, and like it's going to be very important East Kentwood makes it because if you only have 3 teams, these 3 teams, from this district, then what happened after last week was Caledonia got pushed into this district. So Grandville was going to be rewarded playing Caledonia round 1, Rockford round 2, which is not ideal. So there's a little bit all over the place, but that's kind of where the math is sitting right now. Things are going to kind of equalize where they are with West Ottawa and Hudsonville kind of bouncing back and forth. But again, it's kind of out of Grandville's hands. Like, yeah, win out, and you're going to comfortably stay the 2 seed unless Caledonia moves over. So just keep winning because that puts you in a position where, they're safe to as long as they don't lose to Grand Haven or Jenison, they're more than safe to get in. But, like, it is awkward how this is potentially going to line up right now. Like, it's one of those playoff years where Caledonia coming in and being a Division I team this year, it adds a little bit more math to how this district has worked than in years past.
Yeah, a little bit more moving pieces when you're talking about the teams that are trying to fit into that district there. I think, the nightmare scenario, obviously, for the Bulldogs is ending up in the same district as Rockford and Caledonia both in that opening District 1 there. That's the worst-case scenario where you're having to play one in the first round, and if you're able to win that game, then facing the other one for the district championship. But, it's kind of an interesting scenario when you've got the teams at the top, when you've got Rockford, Caledonia, and Grandville all kind of fighting around now that the Bulldogs have kind of dropped more into that second seed area. You've got Rockford and Caledonia on top of everything else that game is going to mean. Also going to be shifting around there, that first round matchup when you're talking about who's going to be in the same round in the same district as the Bulldogs. And then you've also got those teams kind of in the middle of the pack that we've been talking about in our power rankings, where you've got East Kentwood, West Ottawa, Hudsonville, all right in the same situation, and whoever's able to separate themselves in these last couple weeks as they're going to be playing each other back and forth has a chance to sneak in as well.
Yeah, don't mind me, I was just messing around and looking. You see this right now? Region 4, District 1, Belleville and Saline are in the same.
Oh, wow.
That'd be the same as if you get Caledonia and Grandville in one. So Belleville has like the top quarterback in the country in the 2025 class, plus they're scoring like 55 points a game. Obviously, CJ Carr, trader of the Carr family, is at Saline, but they're going to be good because of him. And West Bloomfield here in Region 3. It's going to Region 2. So, remember when I made that bold prediction earlier on whoever wins this Region 1 goes to the Ford Field?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm back in because they moved West Bloomfield. Or right now as it sits, they would likely have to move West Bloomfield. Grand Blanc 3-3. What an entertaining show this is.
Yeah.
Let's just buzz through some of the other divisions. Can you tell this is the first time I've looked at all this, folks?
My favorite part is when you just get to making bold claims as we're going through
coming up with them on the fly. That's what this is about. Forest Hill Central, we'll talk about them, and they keep winning Motor Stores. That's going to be, jeez. Reese Puffer, 5-1. They're 5-1, I guess. But they're the undercard story in this mess. No one else from this area. So that's Division 2. Forest Hill Central just keeps winning, but I do not like, even for as good as they are, I don't like the Mona Shores matchup for them. If you have any bold claims, just jump in. I'm just going to keep buzzing through some of this right here. There's a sneak preview and ads of what our new MGN quarter-zip pullovers are going to look like. So this is Division 3. So stupid. What is it? What a terrible show design this is. We need a producer.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to be a producer, please, we need help. You can probably tell we need help. Look at this. This is Muskegon. So still the 1 seed. Zealand West, of course, lost. We'll get to that. Coopersville, who can defend. That's a fascinating matchup. Lowell, they nearly beat Forest Hill Central this past week.
Yep.
They're tough and mean. Zealand West, believe it or not, they're tough and mean.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mess in Division 3. What else?
That's a district that looks like could be some mayhem in there when you're talking about Muskegon being the 1 seed, and they haven't been super inspiring all year long. Zealand West, who had been a power until they lost now, and Lowell and Coopersville, both as the lower seeds in that district, both have played pretty well at times and have already snuck up and beat some teams that some people didn't think they would.
And Lowell having to play a lot of Division 2 teams on their schedule. That's a danger matchup for both, honestly, for both teams, because both those teams are just so tough that they're playing. Like, that's if things hit, which, honestly, I don't know how much things are going to really move from how they are right there. Like, that's potentially tough for everyone involved. Cadillac's up to Division 3 this year? Wow. Informed sports opinions. This is Michigan Game Night. You're home for game night or whatever. I'm the marketing guy. I should know the catchphrases. All right, this is Division 4, Region 1, District 2. South Christian, of course, number 1. Grand Rapids Christian. I mean, Forest Hills Eastern, very sneaky. Just keeps winning, by the way, too. And then Unity sitting there. I mean, this is an all-timer matchup that we're setting up between South Christian and Unity Christian if things remain as they are, which again, kind of how things are, I think they are going to roughly remain this way, especially because Forest Hills Eastern's already gotten to the 5-win threshold. They've kind of settled themselves there. Like, they probably will fall maybe as 3 or 4. Grand Rapids Christian, I don't think is going to fall out of it. And that's what's setting up. Like, we're setting up for South Christian, Unity Christian, which would be, I think, the district championship of the year, maybe in the state.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we'll talk about it.
Amazing we're back there with Unity again.
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah, I've already got myself back to that point with Unity again right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Unity when we go through our conference power rankings as well. But yeah, Unity quietly putting together a run here. The offense looks like they're potentially back. And, of course, South Christian with that huge win last week. 2 teams that really could be a great matchup.
Don't sleep on Whitehall here either, because they've got a great route out of there, and they're going to be waiting. I don't want to say rested, but they're going to be waiting in good shape for I still think South Christian's then probably likely the favorite there, but they're in good shape for whoever they potentially see. Whitehall's got a chance to really, really sneaky do something this year. Division 5. Belding obviously is the runaway. We'll talk about them. We're giving away a lot for our next picks. And then the big note, Catholic Central, but that's who Catholic Central is playing right now? Okay, so Catholic Central is moving on.
not getting punished too much for the loss there.
No, not getting So, yeah, I mean, you have a couple West Side teams all in it. We won't go to Division 6 because we know West Catholic is also kind of a runaway where they're at. So that's a little bit of a look around in the most well-put-together segment of the day. It is our playoff preview, whatever it is. Let's do some rankings. Let's save the people. Are you ready? Okay, Red. Everyone knows what we do. We go bottom 3, middle 3, top 2. I think things are going to be a little boring this week. It probably just honestly comes down to who we decide to put number 1 to some extent. It might be a little bit of differentiation in the bottom, but honestly, in the OK Red, things getting a little boring right now. So I'll go first. At 8, I have Grand Haven. I mean, I think fairly self-explanatory why they remain in that position they're in. And then I've got Jenison 7, West Ottawa 6. At this point, West Ottawa, 1 more win. So that's really why I have that in terms of my bottom 3.
Yeah, I think not a lot has changed in the bottom for me either. Grand Haven, a pretty distant 8. I know you totally disagree with this.
You did it again?
I did it again, yeah.
They have 1 more win now.
I agree. Yeah, no, I can't argue that. And I tinkered with the idea of flip-flopping them, and I was like, well, I've stuck with it to this point. I got to see it through the Grandville-Jenison game. Not necessarily that I think Jenison's winning, but that I think I see, this is going to be the fundamental difference here between how we do this. But if I think two teams are close, I like to look ahead and project a little bit into to what I think's coming up. And so at this point, we're so close to Jenison, West Ottawa, Week 9.
Yep.
And just personal, I feel like Jenison's maybe got the upper hand in that game. So I don't feel like switching them now just for that matchup coming up in a couple weeks.
We're going to wind up, so Week 9, Grandville's at East Kentwood. Joey Sutherland and the East Kentwood Michigan Sports Radio crew will have that game on video for all of you. So that means we're open Week 9 to do a game of the week. And we're going to be able to go anywhere we want that there's not already another broadcast of for Michigan Sports Radio to cover. Like, oh my gosh, there's 2 4-4 teams. The winner gets into the playoffs, whatever. And we're going to be at Jenison, West Ottawa, because we have this grudge over 6 and 7 in our power rankings. And I promise you we're willing to do. Also, I want to go to the stadium, but I promise you that we're willing to do that. So that's that right now. I think that's got to be it in terms of disagreement still at this point in time.
Pretty much.
We'll see. I'll let you go 5 through 3 now.
All right, yep, 5 through 3. Things staying pretty similar, at least 5 and 4. Hudsonville at 5. They've ripped off 2 wins since we last talked. East Kentwood still got them at 4, even though they've had 2 losses since we last did this.
Yeah.
So kind of going opposite directions there. Part of that just due to the matchups. I've still got East Kentwood ahead of Hudsonville, and then pretty clear 3 in Grandville.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've talked about the tiers as well. So right now, in terms of, we started the year kind of with 3 tiers, and now the tiers are growing. By the way, I have the same middle 3, and I think Hudsonville has got a chance to change that real quick, even in a loss this week. If it's close-ish, I think they have a chance to even jump. Especially if you're projection guy, I think it's pretty clear where this thing's going. We know how good Hudsonville still actually is. I mean, Hudsonville still is probably gonna. Hudsonville likely rattles this thing off and goes 5 and 4 still. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how that goes. But when you look at tiers, you have the top 2 teams in a clear breakaway tier. Grandville is kind of settled into their own tier just because they've lost to both now. You then have East Kentwood, Hudsonville kind of in their own middle tier. West Ottawa, Jenison in their own little tier where they're obviously fighting back and forth a little bit, although West Ottawa, Jenison's got a tough road. Jenison's not making the playoffs at this point in time. I mean, it would take them going 4 and 5 and then getting lucky with the playoff points, which I guess is possible. I haven't really looked at it too much. And then Grand Haven is in their own tier. I mean, if you miss a game in the OK Red, you probably wind up in your own tier. And that's kind of where things are at. We'll see them next week when they come to Grandville on Bulldog Senior Night there. All right, so the top 2, do you want to go first or me?
Go for it.
I'll go for it. So for me, this was like pulling teeth, and I really couldn't. I went back and forth, and I'm like, you know what? The only thing we can do is we can go off what we saw of them versus Grandville. One game, Grandville truly had a lot of chances, I think, to get back into it and maybe even win the game. For as bad as things were even going for Grandville, one game they had a chance to win. The other they never really did. Now, one was at Grandville, one was at not Grandville. But the way I see it right now, also it's a little bit of like, you have to dethrone the big bad monsters once we gotten through here. I would have had Caledonia above them last week if we had a show. We said it on the air at the end of the broadcast. I'm going to have Rockford 1, Caledonia 2. Just because, like, the head-to-head, and it's like, yeah, like, now it's kind of back to resetting to, like, you're going to have to prove me wrong, and now it's just waiting till week 9.
Yeah, I think you pretty much made every point that I was looking at as well. When you're the first thing I was thinking is the matchup between Grandville and, like you said, if we had done this last week, I would have put Caledonia 1 because they looked so impressive. But then after Rockford kind of upped the ante against Grandville as well, then I'm sticking Rockford 1 as well. Again, part of that's just because Rockford's been there, done that at this point. Caledonia's the team that until I see it, they're going to be the 1B for right now, but that Caledonia defense, still, I'm just really looking forward to that matchup, I guess, at the end of the day, because I think the Caledonia defense is set up pretty well to try and slow down Caledonia's or Rockford's offense, but there's so many ways you can try to break that thing down a couple weeks away, but I'm going to stick Rockford 1A, Caledonia 1B.
So 2 points for me. Point 1, also that Mona Shores, when we'll talk about Mona Shores in a minute, that looks more impressive by the week as that goes by for Rockford. Now, part 2, what I'll say, back to the firing off hot takes. So I'm going to have Rockford ahead of Caledonia for the next few weeks, likely, until they play. I will say, though, I think Caledonia is going to win the game. Like, I do think Rockford still has had some issues against power spread team stopping the run. They stopped the T very well, as Randy Vanderveen's done for 30 years. But, I think like the way it sets up with the defense, like the way it sets up, I'm like, I think Caledonia actually wins that game, but for the time being, based on a resume, I have to put Rockford 1. But I actually think if you made me pick right now, assuming Mason McKenzie's at 100%, I think Caledonia's winning that, and it's at Caledonia. Keep in mind the muddy track then by near November as well, with one team that wants to throw it, one team wants to run it. Like I think Caledonia wins the game, but I'm going to put Rockford ahead for right now on resume. Now, Rockford might go out, stumble. Really, the only thing that could change is if Rockford stumbles a little bit this week. And if they don't look great against Hudsonville, or especially if they lose, that's the one way that things flip around. I mean, if they lose to Hudsonville, what do you do with them in Grandville? Because they beat Grandville head-to-head, but losing to Hudsonville then is not, and then they've got just as many losses as each other.
Yeah, and I think I'd still have to go Rockford ahead of Grandville at this point.
Because you're not an entertainer.
Yeah, because the head-to-head. But, I mean, that would, when you start, when you've just got the three teams at the top beating up on each other, it's pretty clear at this point now that Grandville's lost to both, of how that's going to sort out. But, yeah, when you throw in an upset in there as well, a team that is kind of more middle of the pack jumps up and beats one of the teams in the top three, now you kind of got a little bit more of a mess.
Yeah, for sure. All right. That's where we guess. We both have Rockford 1 over Caledonia right now, and likely not changing until week 9 when it's the game of the year. Like I said, we've got, we'll be able to go wherever we want. Maybe where we want will be on our couch to watch that game.
True.
Because we'll do a rogue broadcast. Brock, don't listen. We're going to do a rogue broadcast from the stands at Caledonia. We're good at it.
Yeah, I was going to say,
no
we've done
one
something
does
similar.
more terrible weather outside games than seriously, I don't think anyone in this state have stood outside in as many snowstorms and rainstorms as we have in the past 2 years, for better or for worse. Shout out Unity Christian last year, the terrific state semifinal game. That was just so much fun. All right, Power 6. So we both have Rockford atop the OK Red right now. Again, 37-14 over Grandville. They proved their point there. Both sides of the ball moved it, to the efficiency of the offense. I think this is going to be the most boring week yet, right? I don't think it's possible really for either of us to have anything different unless you really wanted to get tricky with it. But this is as boring as I think it's going to get. OK Green, I mean, Mona Shores, they wound up very surprisingly thrashing Zeeland West, which Zeeland West, I think, went up 6-0 even in that game, and the final score was 34-6. So Mona Shores is building and getting stronger, as Coach Koziak's teams always do. I'm sure you're back to the same.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Mona Shores. I mean, the domination of Zeeland West, I thought they won that, or were going to win that game going into it, but the way that they just able to dominate Zeeland West.
I thought Zeeland West was going unbeaten this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, Mona Shores right now, their only loss coming to a Rockford team that we just talked about. So, and Zeeland West, by the way, averaging 45 points coming into that game. So,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, no, and then, I mean, just looking at the other teams, since this is going to be kind of boring, just looking at maybe the second and third teams, Zeeland West, but Muskegon still 4-2, lost to Zeeland West, and for all the hype that was about them coming into the season, they're kind of falling into that third place territory now.
Yeah, well, what if they beat Mona Shores, though? I mean, back
That's
to
true.
the hypotheticals, then
they do still have that matchup coming up.
That's the one way that we can still make this thing fun, is if we have kind of a triangle at the top. OK White, I mean, this one's been settled, and this one's quietly been settled for a long time, and it's a team that I wasn't overly hot on at the start of the year. I think I had Grand Rapids Christian, who's back to 3-3. This is not a team that they're so good. They're consistent, but they lost 40 seniors. I don't think is incorrect to say from their team last year, something ridiculous. But I mean, Coach Rogers has them rolling. Forest Hill Central, they beat Lowell 14-7, so they've won high scoring. They now win a slugfest. Forest Hill Central just stays where they're at.
Yeah, I think hard to argue with that when you're undefeated and just beat a team in Lowell that was kind of in the scrappy territory of being at the top of that conference as well. But yeah, I think Byron Center's still there. They had an 8-point loss to Forest Hill Central, and of course their own other loss coming to Grandville, kind of in that territory that if you were to see a matchup, I'd be interested, or a rematch later in the season or in the playoffs, kind of what we were previewing. I'd be interested in that one, but it's hard to argue against Forest Hill Central.
OK Gold, I was 2 weeks ahead, folks. I'm gonna stake this one because now we've been forced to go on the same page with it. the game of the year. I watched Bob Sack, John Wasnick on the call of that game. 36-34, South Christian beats Catholic Central in a stupid game down the stretch, but they hang on and they win it. Catholic Central, I actually shut it off like a minute to go or whatever when it was back up like a score and a half, and then Catholic Central scores again. Just absolute insanity. But yeah, South Christian hangs on. They win, and I believe that snaps a 46 game win streak against West Side teams for Catholic Central.
Wow. Yeah, I figured it had to be some crazy number like that with what they've done the last couple seasons. But yeah, no, finally able to knock off GRCC. I think we saw maybe just a little preview of GRCC could maybe not be the full strength that they've been when they had that close game a couple weeks ago. So they were kind of playing with fire coming into it. But yeah, South Christian able to finally knock them off. And so, yeah, clearly at the top now.
I'm trying to do the math on that. I don't know if Catholic Central has lost a West Michigan game since I started at Michigan game night.
Oh, wow.
No, it would have been since you started.
Okay.
I think the year you started at the Big House. Would that be probably 18? Maybe it was, I believe that they have not lost a West Side game then until this one since you started at game night, which is like 5 years ago. So that is absolutely insane. OK Blue, West Catholic beat Hamilton 51-19, which was, they were expected to take care of business. Hamilton's going through, I got inside information, of course, there for us being from there, but they're going through some weird things right now. Their offense, they started a year running a flexbone veer, and they're a spread team now a lot of the time. So they're going 4 wide sets and spreading it out, and they actually have shown, they scored pretty well against Unity Christian. I think, did Unity score 51? I think they scored roughly the same amount of points as West Catholic, but Hamilton scored more against them. So West Catholic, both sides of the ball, very, very impressive. They're looking like not just the team to beat within the OK Blue, but obviously Unity's going to give them a run for the money. But even if Unity does beat them, I think Division 6 is getting wrapped up real quick right now in this state.
Yeah, that's the way it's looking, and that was one of the games that I was tuned into on Friday night. A bit of a scare at halftime for West Catholic. Not necessarily a scare. It was a closer game, and then they remembered they had Klauska on the backfield, and then just decided that, hey, we're going to give him the ball and let him take over and go for 51 points. Not all by himself, but a big part of it. And so, yeah, I think still setting up for that matchup between West Catholic and Unity, who's been on a roll. We kind of talked about them a little bit earlier. Their offense has scored 50-plus in 3 straight games now, so they're looking like maybe they've figured things out a little bit. So definitely that one's going to be a big matchup there when you're talking about West Catholic, who's been probably a clear-cut team most of the season, and Unity team that, the history now getting hot and trying to jump up and take a game there.
Yeah, it was, I do have to say, it was actually kind of terrific, actually, our first weekend off ever. Getting to just kind of go through some of the Michigan sports radio games. Like you said, I was just sitting in my hotel room at the event in Detroit I was covering over the weekend. So I just sat in my hotel room and was bouncing around between the different games. Wait for Brock's Wi-Fi to come back on the Grandville game. So OK Silver. It's been chaos, but it's settled now. Belding's still scoring 50 points per game. They beat Comstock Park. Look, we're having more computer issues. We almost made it to the end of the show. They beat Comstock Park 44-7. Don't know what happened to Comstock Park. No. That's a lost cause. But Belding, the Black Knights just keep winning. They keep winning. They keep looking good. I know they run I think they run the wing tee. I don't think they even run the power tee. I think they run the old school the wing tee.
Okay.
Again, they're scoring 50 points per game, pretty much top 10 team offensively in the state. Still, they keep rolling and Hopkins is probably a team that's maybe sitting second in the wings, but Belding's just put themselves where they need to be. Now they've come out of what we thought was going to be a mess all year, and they've kind of solidified themselves first. Yeah,
I won't argue against Belding at the top. I think, scoring 50 points a game. The only thing I'd point out, is Hopkins. Belding is week 9. Okay. Hopkins is now 5 wins in a row after losing week 1.
Yep.
So they're looking like they figured things out a little bit. So that one going to be probably for the conference there at the end. And just for fun, because I've been watching them now and keeping track of Sparta since I pronounced them dead. They are the only team that's even kept it remotely close against Belding.
Yeah.
5-point loss to Belding, and that's the only team that's kept it even
I
that
tell you
close
what,
at all. But
game of the week. Is that game at Belding or at Hopkins?
I do not know
It's a
right off.
Long haul either way. For actually probably better to go to Hopkins. Oh, Hopkins, you got to sit on the roof at Hopkins. So we'll see. We're doing some live show playing. That might be where we are week 9 because if no one else is there, I can't imagine 96.1 will be there. But if they are, that would be, or if they aren't, that would be interesting. Or maybe if they are, that would be an interesting one. We're gonna go wherever Bakita is.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing.
We just want a crammed press box. That's
We
what
want
we're
a
looking
crammed
for,
press box.
or
But
outside.
I want to sit outside the first weekend in November. That's all I want. All right, Grandville, Jenison. Hopefully we'll be inside. We'll be inside. Don't worry. Grandville, Jenison, 6:30 p.m. Friday. Should be a good one. MichiganSportsRadio.com/MGN. We're on a Twitter stream. We're on a Facebook stream, assuming our tech guy is able to get that stream up and running this week like he didn't do a couple weeks ago on Twitter. You can find us on the Michigan Sports Radio app, MichiganGameNight.com. You can find all of it. That's how you know. It's going to be an interesting matchup. It's going to be one of those games where even if it's not close, I just like watching Jenison. They do unique things on both sides of the ball. Like, it's going to be a fun football game, I think, regardless what the score is.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think no matter what the Jenison, what they bring to the table is at least an interesting and fun to watch. The Bulldogs kind of find themselves in an interesting spot where everything early in the season was going their way. Got off to the hot start, unlike what we've seen from them in the past couple years. And now off a cold stretch here, we're in 2 tough losses that could really hurt, trying to turn that thing around and get back to the way they felt early in the season.
All right, he's got a rec flag football game he's got to get to. So we're going to cut this thing off. We'll see everyone 6:30 on Friday. This has been the Tailgate Report. Clear.